right, welcome back to the Green Dispensary Marketing GDM podcast. As you guys know, always trying to be talking with the best entrepreneurs, movers and shakers, players in the cannabis industry. And today we're talking about payments. And so, you know, when you're in the cannabis industry, I see it all the time. I've seen some big players go on LinkedIn and start flaming, oh, my payment processor is not letting us do any payments. What do I do? What do I do? And so we actually also recently went through that little drama, and then we ended up meeting somebody named Sean Conley, who's the founder of MTXE Merchant Processing. And he's on here to talk about his cool platform, who it works for, how it works, and all that cool stuff. Super excited about this. This is a real product that we're using, that we're having great success with, and that I would highly recommend. But I'm here to talk with Sean about it, probably learn some more about it, and then also maybe introduce him to the right people in the audience out there listening. But that being said, super excited to talk with you, Sean. How are you doing today?
Yeah, Sam, doing well. I appreciate you having me on here and excited, to talk about payments, especially in this industry that you kind of alluded to that has been, very, very hard to navigate and hard to, be able to get things set up for the industry. So excited to hopefully share some tips, tricks, a little bit about my company, MTXE, and see what we can do and help, other companies that might be struggling in the payment side of things.
Yeah, and this is really hard stuff. This is why people like you exist, because you kind of bridge tools and all these banks and all these players together on one nice little platform. But without jumping into too much, I want to start off with learning a little about who you are. So can you tell me a little bit about your background, what you were doing before you started MTXE Merchant Processing, who you are, what you stand for, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the last probably 10 years, I've been building and helping small businesses and startups build their companies, mainly on the sales and partnership side. And then, specifically the last 6 years, I've really been focused on the cannabis, CBD and hemp industry. I started a little over 6 years ago running the payment division for Leaf Logics. Obviously, they got acquired by Dutchy with Greenbit, so I ran their entire payment division for about 1.5 to 2 years. Had a lot of good success there. Once I left there, I got recruited to go over and run the payment divisions and partnerships for Allies and BioTrack. So came over, was able to set a lot of things up, get the right partnerships in place. But that's my bread and butter. I love growing companies. I love partnerships, and payments is one of those necessities that anybody in retail or business, they need to have that. That's their lifeblood, right? That's how they accept payments. If you can't accept payments, you can't really do business. So, like I said, last 10 years been growing it. Decided to risk everything and put the stuff on myself, right? I've been helping other people grow their dreams and their companies for 10 plus years, and about a year ago, I decided to, start MTXE. MTXE, everybody always asks, it's mental toughness, extra effort. At the end of the day, that's something that is very important to me, mental toughness and be able to get through things, because we know in cannabis and payments, things aren't easy and you have to be mentally tough. And, I am very big with my company that you got to give extra effort. I don't care if it's, a merchant that's doing, $1,000 a month or someone that's doing, $1 million a month. We're going to give that extra effort every single day, because if someone's going to trust me and my company and my team, that I want to make sure that we have the best of the best for them, and we're always going to do what we can do. So yeah, it's a little bit about MTXE merchant processing.
Yeah, well, if you jumped out and you went all in on this, you're definitely practicing what you preach here. Your mental toughness. It is not easy to jump all in on a business, as you know. So I wanted to shout you out for that. But real quick, what do you think? There's a lot of different payment processors out there, my man. From the classics, the PayPal, Stripe. So we don't have to go into other high risk merchants. But what do you think makes MXTC stand out? Or MXTE, excuse me, MTXE. Stand out from other. I always mess that up, and I'm your customer too, man. Yeah, I still mess it up. But what do you think makes you stand out from others?
Yeah, I would say the experience, right? I think that's the biggest thing. Unless you've actually, been in the ground floor of a lot of these things, you don't know. And when I first got into payment processing, it was more on the dispensary side, right? A lot of the cashless ATM. So it's not your normal everyday credit card processing, ACH processing that you see outside the space. So, most of those players would start, on the traditional merchant processing side, but the cannabis side is so much different. There's different rules and regulations, compliances, and what you can and cannot do. And luckily, I had the privilege to run, a lot of payment companies or a lot of payment divisions for these companies, and start at the ground floor, right? Having those conversations, seeing what their issues are, and then be able to expand my payment company to traditional merchant processing outside dispensaries, right? We have solutions for dispensaries that can take debit cards and things like that. But I think something that a lot of people didn't really realize was, the cannabis dispensaries that are actually plant touching, they're not the only ones that are having issues with payments. A lot of the ancillary companies that support the industry are having those issues. CPA firms, marketing agencies like yourself, point of sale companies, data companies, they were getting rocked with fees 5-6%. They were getting shut down by QuickBooks, Stripe, Square, the places that don't really want them, that are going to try to spin them up, process for a week, and then shut them down. So be able to really see that, taking the knowledge to really understand what the issues are. And then also, Sam, I think the big one is transparency, right? High risk payments, it's not super cut and dry. It's not black and white. It's always a case by case basis, they say at the end of the day. And so I always, go into the conversation like, hey, this is what their goal, this is what our goal is. What is your goal? And then keeping them up to date the entire time. So really being a true extending partner of all the merchants that I help with, that sets MTXE apart from everybody else, because we're not going to set you up and forget about you. Because in high risk merchant processing, you have to be a true dedicated partner to make sure that they're getting their funds, making sure that they're not overcharged, making sure that chargebacks are staying low. And it's just a true extension of that other company's, partner division.
Yeah, 100%. Let's zoom out. You're touching upon something that I wanted to go on a deeper rabbit hole. And so I know a lot of people in marketing and whatever online digital products. And so the number one, two, three platforms for payments are QuickBooks, PayPal, Stripe. What would you say to people in the space that are using one of those three platforms?
Yeah, I mean, obviously those are good platforms for certain industries. At the end of the day, people just are familiar with those names. So it's not like, Stripe and PayPal and Venmo and Square, they can do things that I can't do. That's not necessarily true, right? It's still payment processing. We can both process credit cards. We can both process ACH payments. But when you really look at it, people normally go straight to Stripe because that's what people are familiar with. Hey, it's an online, but I don't think they really get how expensive it does. I mean, when you look at it, it's like, okay, hey, we start at 2.9%. And if you want to do reoccurring, it's another 0.7%. If you want to do this, it's another 0.4%. So it just adds on and on. And those companies aren't set up for mid to high risk companies. They're really meant for low risk companies, your restaurants, your retails, things like that. Because what they do is, why people also go with them is they get on board a little bit quicker than what they would do with a true merchant processing high risk account with MTXE. And why that is they don't really do the underwriting up front. Like, hey, as soon as that account comes in, they kind of almost auto approve them and allow them to start processing. Yeah. And then once they're on, they start doing the underwriting. And then guess what? You get shut down. You see that all the time. I mean, you see the reviews for Stripe and Square and all the, hey, they stole my money. They have it in hold. They do this, and this. Is because those companies aren't set up for those companies, right? So at the end of the day, if you're using QuickBooks and Stripe and things like that, it could be a matter of time. You might not think it's coming, but again, there's been so many companies that have reached out to us and that we've helped that have been shut down instantly. And they're like, hey, we're scrambling. Now they have to go back to their clients, and now it affects their business and then their income and their whole livelihood. So I'm like, let's take a little, an extra day or so to really figure out what the kind of company you are, what processing needs you are. Let's do the correct, proper underwriting up front. That way, when we do board you, you don't have a risk of, being shut down unless obviously, someone's doing money laundering or something crazy that they shouldn't be doing. But that's the true thing of it is make sure that we have the right pieces in front before we onboard them. So we know, hey, yes, this is a true high risk merchant. Do we need to have chargeback protection for you? What do we need to have set up for their success? And that's the big thing right now, because a lot of people utilize QuickBooks. We have an integration right with QuickBooks, so they can process all their stuff through QuickBooks, but utilize our pricing. We're a lot less expensive than your QuickBooks and your Stripe, because again, we can be a little bit more aggressive because we don't have a company of 10,000 employees. We have to we do. So at the end of the day, we do have better support, we have better pricing, and we have just as great tech as these other companies as well.
Yeah, and I think one of the big selling points, at least for me and others in the space, having gone through the trauma of being shut down by one of those big platforms, you never again want to go through that again, because if it takes 6 months to get through an account, and maybe that account has like $10,000 in it, and you have to sit and wait, and there's nothing you can do, and you're on their platform, so you're playing by their rules. Whereas if we go to MTXE, this sort of nonsense isn't going to happen, especially in the cannabis business. And so, you're already in a high risk industry. Why make the risk even higher?
Couldn't agree more. Yeah, a lot of times, again, those big players, they don't care about the small players, right? If they, someone goes off their platform, something like that, they don't care. You probably never even hear from them again. And that's where I really tell my team and myself and really hold us to a high standard is listen, if someone's going to trust us with their payment processing for their business, they're putting pretty much everything into us. So I'm I have every reason to make sure that you guys are being successful, you and every other merchant out there, because I truly care about the small, SMB and mid-market, because at the end of the day, that is the driving force for companies. Again, if you can't accept payments, it's hard to run a business that way.
Yeah, while we're on the topic of small businesses, we're not super big, as but we did go through a lot of different merchant processors. Is that the right word? Merchant processing platforms, to kind of shop around, as you know. And one of the common things that we got hit with was these reserve things, where 5 to 10% of any sort of payment we get goes into a reserve account, and that was one huge red flag for us. And I wanted to shout you out because you did not do that for us, and that was why we went with you, Sean.
I appreciate that. And yeah, and most of my high risk ones, I try not to do any kind of reserve. Obviously that's not going to be the case for everyone. And it all depends a lot of times on the processing history. But most of my partnerships and relationships with sponsored banks, I really like to say hey, I don't want to affect their cash flow right? Because that's a huge part of their business. So if I don't have to do a reserve or anything like that one, I'm not going to. Now, sometimes I do get pushback from my risk team or underwriting team and say, hey, they do have a very high chargeback ratio. Just to make sure that we're safe, we need to include some kind of reserve. And of course, any merchant that's dealing with me and my company, I absolutely let them know up front, hey, this is going to be required and this is why. Or most of the time I'm hey, this is not going to be required and why. So again, all about that full transparency, but I appreciate that. Yeah, and like I said, at the end of the day, cash flow is really big, and holding 10%, because a lot of them will hold it for 180 days, 270 days, and yes, you'll eventually get that money back, but it really affects that cash flow and what you have to do to pay your bills and be able to have your income and be able to do your business. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, 100%, man. Well, I'm assuming somebody's listening to this is already a little sold on this. So what does onboarding look like, man? So how do we get started? How fast does this work? What do we have to do to work with you, man?
Yeah, that's a great question. So normally with every kind of high risk business, first thing I like to do is just what we call a pre-check. And it's just a simple one page that we get, some basic information. Hey, what's your company? What's your company website? How much volume are you doing? Are you currently processing now? What products are you selling? And then once I get that one, I go to all my sponsor banks and I say, hey, here is the pre-vet. Are you able to, take a look at a full application and underwrite this account? Some will come back and say, nope, this is not in our wheelhouse. Someone will come back and say, yep, this is in our wheelhouse. Please collect a full package. Once I do that, that's when I normally reach out, or someone from my team reaches out to our merchants and say, hey, here's what the cost is going to be. I'll send you the application. The application is obviously going to be fully transparent with no hidden fees. It's going to have all the fee breakdown there. Once they have the application back to me and all the underwriting documents, pretty simple stuff, right? Voided check, bank letter, processing statements, IDs, nothing too crazy unless you're getting super, super high volume. Then maybe some tax returns might come into it, but that's normally for, 100,000 plus of value. But we submit that to our underwriting team. And then normally within 24 hours, they get back to us with what they call PINs, or pending items. So that could be things like, hey, they're selling a couple of items on their website that are illegal, not FDA approved, things like that. They need to take those down in order to get approved. Great. So I come back, hey, here's all the things. Here's maybe an addendum they have to sign, maybe like a CBD addendum saying hey, they're not going to sell cannabis if they're doing CBD and things like that as well. But normally once we submit that full package and the application, normally I would say within 2 to 3 days, we get the ad approval. Once that approval is done, that's when I go into our gateway. I'll create the gateway like I did for you. You'll get, access to it, and then I do an onboarding. Hey, here's how you do invoicing, how you do reoccurring charges. If you need ACH, we can do ACH as well. Here's how you run transactions. But it's a pretty smooth process. It just depends a lot of time back on the merchant themselves. Hey, how quick can they get us the underwriting documents? How quickly can they fill out the application? Application is not too hard, right? Hey, just asking, very basic. Hey, what's your volume you're doing? Obviously KYC stuff, some stuff about your business, and then just, collecting those documents at the end of the day.
No, hell yeah, man. Well, let's jump to the elephant in the room, man, because, a lot of people listening, they might be thinking, well, how much are you going to charge me, man? Like, what's the deal here? And so I know for my personal experience that you helped us save money on our charges. How does that typically work? How do you calculate what your charges are for a typical business?
Yeah, great question. And that one is a true case by case basis, right? So a lot of times it's on volume. Hey, how much volume are they doing, right? Obviously, the more volume they're doing, the lower we can do it. But it also comes back down to what do they need, right? Do they just need a gateway that they can connect to their website to be able to do that one? Do they need to be able to do invoicing? Do they need to be able to do a reoccurring one? Do they need to be able to save card tokens and do they need to have chargeback, things like that as well? And these are things I talk through every merchant, kind of give them pros and cons of, hey, this is what you can do. Hey, maybe there's a service here that you could get that's going to cost a little bit extra, but you don't really need that right now. Maybe, in 3 or 6 months. I'm not trying to get everybody to sign up for everything because, again, like, I don't want them to be paying for services that they're not going to utilize, right? That's not part of my business model by any means. And then when it comes to actually to the transaction fees, again, there's different models we can do, and it depends on what state you're in. Depends if you're in store or online, things like that. But normally, high risk, like I normally like to do interchange plus because that's when it's true interchange, pricing. You know exactly how much I'm going to be making. You know exactly what you're going to be making. Flat rates kind of hard to do because you don't really know how much the processor is making, how much you're actually being charged. If there's ever reductions of interchange, you don't get to keep that. So a lot of times, like what I will tell people is, we have $1,000 guarantee, meaning that, hey, if you send us your processing statements and we cannot beat your pricing, we'll give you guys $1,000 just for allowing us to try at the end of the day, because we know that we do have some very aggressive pricing. But at the end of the day, also, we are a business and we have to make some money. So obviously, I tell them, like, sometimes, a lot of times people come to us and say, I don't even care if you have to, if you're a little bit more expensive, like they're like, the support's terrible. I have this going on. I have massive reserves. They're never getting back to us. Like, even if you can come close to it, we want to move forward with you. And we have those two as well. And then, for in-store, we have a lot of CBD and hemp clients that have in-store ones. So we can look at potential like dual pricing where they can pretty much pass off the fee to their merchant if it's an in-person transaction. Or sometimes with our gateway, we do have surcharging available where they can pass off a small fee to their clients. So it just all depends on what they're kind of wanting to do. But again, what we tell people is like, listen, you go somewhere else, we're going to be able to beat their fee, whether it's going to be by a basis point or by 50 basis point. We've done it all. I mean, I've saved people 1.5 to 2% per transaction, and some of them I save maybe 10 basis points. But at the end of the day, money saved is money saved. And again, if you can get better support, better technology, and be able to trust a true merchant processing account, you're going to be in good hands, because most of them, I would say, your PayPals, your Stripes, like if you're doing invoicing or recurring payments, you're probably being charged close to 4% after all those fees, 4.5% with, hey, Stripe starts at 2.9 plus a 30 cents transaction, plus another 0.4%, all that different stuff. So I would say normally a lot of people are between that 3.5 to probably 5%. And again, that's when I kind of look at and do a full analysis and have my team do a full analysis on their statements, right? Not just what they're paying per card, right? Visa, MasterCard, Amex, but hey, what are they paying on batch fees? What are they paying on monthly fees? What are they paying on chargebacks and things like that as well? Because there's a lot of different areas that people don't realize. And it's not default to their own, because the processing statements are sometimes really difficult to understand. What am I actually paying for? What do all these things mean? My team does that full analysis, and we come back and say, hey, here's everything you're paying, here's what we can do, and here's what your savings is going to be about.
Yeah, and we were talking about a lot of features there, man, and I wanted to kind of jump back into that a little bit there, because that's one of the things in my mind that really makes this platform stand out. For example, I have a client, for example, this is all hypothetical, this is not real, but they just asked me to charge them for their ad campaign. this client is out on vacation in Florida. They're in Disney World, and they're not on their phone. So how do we get them to charge it? Well, usually beforehand, what I have to do is invoice them, wait for that to get paid, and then all of a sudden we have our funds. One big feature that I love about your platform is that we can put them in the customer vault, and then anytime they say, "Hey, yeah, charge me," say, "Hey, I will charge you," and I can do that within 5 seconds. And that is the coolest thing. What other cool features do you see that maybe stand out on your platform that you don't necessarily see on others, if any?
Yeah, I would say, on our gateway, like you kind of mentioned on that one, right? You can do invoicing with us. You can do reoccurring billing, like you said, like, hey, if reoccurring billing, that's something that's super important because, with subscriptions, but also, being able to automatically update that card. We know that, hey, every few years your card expires and you send a new one. Well, when that happens, people don't automatically think, oh, I need to go update my card everywhere. So we have an automatic card updater that you can have access to. So when that does get reissued, it updates in the system automatically. And that way you're not going to miss any subscriptions. People really love that. Fraud management, right? And be able to, look at potential chargeback and things like that and say, hey, is this a legit one? Are we going to do ABS verification? What kind of verification are we doing in 3DS? Like, are we going to make sure that this is a legit one and not someone that's fraud? People really love that in the high risk side. I would say another one is, we do have the ability to text invoices too. That's additional service, not that expensive by any means, but some people are like, hey, I don't ever check emails. I want to be able to send it via text message. Great. We have the ability to send a link via text message where they can click right on the link and pay for their thing right there. And then for people that are doing higher tickets, maybe 1,000, 5,000, 3,000, ones that are, super high. A lot of it, we have an integrated solution for ACH as well. And with ACH, obviously, you're probably going to save, 2 to 3% on those ones because it's a lot less expensive. You don't really have to worry about too much chargebacks or have to worry about, reserves on that side of it. But you can offer and say, hey, I want to be able to give my merchant or my client an opportunity to pay with credit card and ACH or just credit card or just ACH. So I think a lot of people loving that and having that flexibility. And then it's very API friendly, right? You can get very, very, specific with what you want to do with it. SDKs, APIs, all kinds of documentation that we have. So if you want to connect it to your website, if you just want to utilize it just for invoicing, if you want to kind of make your own kind of page and utilize the code back there, feel free to do that. That's exactly what we want to do. We want to make it specific for those companies, be able to utilize, hey, your logos and you're comfortable and things like that as well. So we definitely have a lot of, really awesome features. I think another one is we have an integration to QuickBooks. I think a lot of people utilize QuickBooks. And so they're like, well, I don't want to go to QuickBooks and then have to go to your platform and do all this different stuff. Great. We can go in there, we can connect it straight to QuickBooks. They can go to QuickBooks. They can send the invoices via QuickBooks, but it all processes through our gateway. So it's through our gateway. It's through our pricing. You're not utilizing, QuickBooks anymore, but it's all done through QuickBooks. So people really love that as well. And then we're starting to see a lot more now with the CBD hemp of Shopify, right? We do have an integration with Shopify as well. Obviously Shopify does charge a little bit extra on that one. So always make sure that they're aware of that one. But a lot of times people are like, hey, I want to be able to utilize Shopify because it's a well-known name company that we can do a website on. But hey, we can connect it. It literally takes probably 2 to 5 minutes to connect. And then again, it's not like it's taking them from Shopify to our platform and back, things like that. It's all done there, but it's processing through our gateway with our pricing and our support at the end of the day too.
Wow, lots to unpack there. Quick question before we kind of change topics here. And so, given the new hemp, the new hemp news, what do you predict for the next year or so on your platform for those who are in the hemp space? THCa, intoxicating hemp, shall we say, if we're going to be correct on the terms here. What do you predict? Are you going to continue to support them? What do you think is going to happen?
Yeah, I think in the payment processing space, just in general, it's going to be a hot mess. Why is it going to be a hot mess? Obviously, anytime new rules like that kind of come out, it's less up to like me and the processor, but it's more like up to the sponsored banks who have the ultimate power of approval of their clients. And so, with that new rule that kind of went into place, I think a lot of the banks out there are kind of scrambling and saying, hey, what do we update our prohibited and restricted list to, right? Is there new parameters? Are there new regulations that we need to do? As far as me, like I'm gonna keep doing everything, and I've been getting a lot of CBD and hemp referrals, and people are reaching out trying to find it
Yeah.
because all the other platforms are booting them, right? Stripes and
Yeah.
QuickBooks and things like that. People don't want to do it because they're like, hey, it's too high risk right now. It's too messy. They don't want to do that. I'm like, it's not fair to those companies, right? They've been spending their entire lives building their companies and tens of thousands of dollars. Like not be able to do payments for someone is not right at the end of the day. And so, as far as MTXE is concerned, we're going to keep supporting them as best as we can. I continuously get more and more bank sponsorships. So, if more people don't want to do it, I have more places to onboard our accounts at, which is going to be great. Like I said, I'm already having more conversation with them, kind of looking at what the regulations are. But a lot of times what I tell them, it comes down to is the COAs, right? Like that's what it really comes down to the sponsored banks is what do the COAs look like? Is it under that 0.3%? As long as that has it, if they have processing history, pretty easy to get that account approved. Some of the harder ones, like if it's a startup, a lot of those banks are kind of like, hey, they're startup. We don't know how much volume they're going to do. They might have high chargeback. So normally, like what we look at is financials. Hey, how much is in your business bank account? How much in your personal account? So if something does happen, we know you do have the funds to cover it as well. But MTXE is here to support, the low risk, mid risk, and definitely high risk industries. We're going to do everything we can to continuously build it to that next level, to be able to support as many companies as we can to ensure that their companies are here for the long time. They don't have to worry about payment processing because we know what owners have a lot of stuff on their mind. They have their employees, they have their business, they have insurance. There's so much going on. One thing I don't want them to worry about is their payment processing. Is it going to work or not? They know if they choose MTXE that, we're going to make sure that's being taken care of. They're going to be able to collect the payments. And if they ever have any issues, they can reach out to myself or my support team. And we're going to be there along the way to help them navigate whatever issue that came up.
Yeah, no, super excited to kind of see how this plays out then, because that is kind of one of the big elephants in the room right now in the cannabis industry is what's going to happen with hemp? What are we doing with hemp? And, it's still kind of an ongoing battle, and it's good to see that people like you are going to continue to help them if at all possible and continue to find those sponsor banks to help them out. And so that's awesome. That's one thing that we're also worried about a little bit here too, because we work with a few of those. We want to keep working with them, but, it's out of our control if the law comes down. But let's move forward. And so, what are the other topics that we wanted to discuss? So you have a lot of experience in this whole payment space, man. Like you were in charge of Dutchy. You were talking about for 2 years, I think you said. And so that comes with a lot of knowledge, a lot of industry insider knowledge that you get just from being in that position, as you know. And so I'm kind of curious, seeing what you've seen, what have been some of the big changes in the past 5 years? What are kind of the big trends that you're seeing? Are things going in the positive direction? What do you see on your end?
Love that question. So at the end of the day, it's funny. Like I'm gonna say has been a lot of changes for certain things of it. I would say from the business side, there's been a lot of changes. I would say from a technology standpoint, there hasn't been. So obviously, any way we look at it in the cannabis side of things, payments are still the very gray area. Is it legal? Because, it's still a federally legal product. So cash and cards and ACH are like, hey, is it actually legal? Is that not legal? You see a lot of companies come in. I would say that's probably the biggest change, right? When I first got into it, there was only really a couple companies that were doing payments, right? And then all of a sudden people saw how profitable it could be. And then you just started seeing a big swarm of companies, right? But then they would go down after a month, after 3 months. They were doing offshore stuff. They were doing shady stuff. They were trying to do, crypto wallet stuff. And it would just screw people over. And then a lot of dispensaries just got frustrated. Right? They're just like, listen, I've had 3 different payment processors that my point of sale company told me to utilize. They've all went down. I'm just going to go back to cash. I don't want to keep doing this to our clients. And understood, the platform we utilize, it's been around for 10 plus years. Probably has close to 2,200 dispensaries across the U.S. on it. So it has the best uptime. But I would say, yes, what has changed is a lot of these small companies come in and they're trying to get some market share. So what are they doing? They're doing what a lot of those companies that don't know how to add value are doing, and they're trying to go to the low level. Hey, I'll give you these massive rebates back. I'll do this. That's not a sustainable thing. And we know that from any kind of company. So it's going in there and adding the value, right? Yes, there's some things that we can do, but I would say that's probably the biggest change is there's been a lot more competition to try to come in. A lot of it has been, failed, aggressively, but then you get some of those companies that are just like, hey, I'm just going to get these big charge or, these rebates back, make sure that the people are going to choose us over someone else. So, unfortunately, that is something that we just have to work through. And again, that's something my team and I just have to work through is adding the value. Yes, we're not going to do these massive rebates. We might be able to do a rebate here and there depending on volume and so forth. But again, it's being that true partner on it. But again, like you're seeing cash ATM, you see ACH. Those are still the main probably two ones out there that people are utilizing. I would say another change is, it used to be pretty much non-integrated payment solutions, right? And now you're starting to see a lot of the cash ATM integrated with 3 to 4 top point of sales out there. I can integrate into, all these. I can integrate into Dutchie and Blaze and BioTrack and things like that. So you see that ACH, I think it's becoming a little bit more popular, but it's still a very low adoption rate out there. Just because people don't want to connect their bank account, which I totally get on that side too. But again, you get a lot of dispensary owners like, hey, I would love to do the tap to pays or be able to do Google and Apple Pay and all this different stuff. And a lot of times it just comes back to the technology of like, hey, we have to be careful what rails we utilize so we're not going against any kind of standards or anything like that one, but it just being transparent. And then every now and then you see these credit card options coming. Hey, credit cards, I'm like, if someone's doing credit cards, you got to stop that, right? You don't want to go on the match list and be able to never take credit cards again, because a lot of times it's going to be super expensive. Credit card companies have made it well known that, hey, you cannot take credit cards on cannabis transactions. And I get people are like, well, I'd rather take credit cards over debit cards. And I said, trust me, I would love to be able to give you access to it. But one thing I won't subject our dispensary partners to is being shut down, being put on the match list, have their funds held. Like, couldn't tell you how many dispensaries reach out and say, hey, is there anything you can do? I got $30,000 being held up right now in an offshore account through the company. And I'm like, I can't do anything about it. All I can do is help educate and have those conversations. But at the end of the day, it's up to that dispensary owner of what they do on that side. So there's been a lot of changes on the business front of like from contracts to fees to rebates and things like that. But from a technology standpoint, the main providers are still kind of around. You haven't really gotten into like crazy new ones. But again, until federal laws and regulations kind of change, we're going to kind of see this until credit cards are being able to be taken, when and if that will ever come up.
Yeah, there's a lot to dive into there, and so let's start with with the surface level stuff. And so 5 years ago, I think that the norm was that you would be cash only, and if you're not paying with cash, they have an ATM on site. And we're talking about dispensaries, if that's not clear. Otherwise, you can't pay. And so recently, I don't know when this was, within a year or so, you can now go in and pay with your card. And so this isn't your this isn't your credit card. This is your debit card that you're going in and paying. And so why, Sean? Why is that for those of people who don't know how this works?
Yeah, so I mean, at the end of the day, when we kind of look at it, there's a lot of different rails, right? You have your debit rails, you have your credit rails. Visa, Mastercard, Amex have made it, said, hey, you cannot take cannabis transactions on their rails. Obviously, they're federally, created companies, so there's different things they have to do. So they made it where like, hey, you cannot take it. Now, obviously, there's certain rails that a lot of these cash ATM providers utilize, so they can kind of stay away from the Visa, Mastercard rails to be able to run the transactions as kind of like a debit transaction or an ATM transaction. So, obviously, there's going to be a lot of people out there that have their own opinion. Right, you're going to have some people that say, "Hey, cash ATM is fully legal; it's the best thing." You're going to have some people say, "Oh, that's definitely illegal. It's masking this thing." I mean, you're going to have that. I mean, I've talked to many lawyers, and it's funny. Some lawyers are like, "Hey, yes, it's good." Other ones will say, "No, it's bad." And then we'll have some that say, "Hey, it's good." And then a month later, their company will be like, "Oh no, we need to pivot and tell them everybody it's bad." So again, everybody's going to have their opinion. Everybody is an expert in this field, and a lot of times it's just like, the way I kind of look at it is like each day is a new kind of day, man. And at the end of the day, we got to do what's best for the industry. It's everything super compliant to the point. Sometimes yes, but again, there's always gonna be some gray ones until it really becomes a federally legal product. We have to do what we have to do, but again, cash ATM has been around for 10, 15 years. It's not just utilizing cannabis, but it's utilizing amusement parks and casinos and things like that at the end of the day. So when we really look at it, it's like, hey, like what is the best technology we can give dispensaries to be able to be successful, increase their ticket share, their average ticket price, be able to reduce cash on hand, because we used to see maybe like 2 years ago, how many robberies would we see? Left and right, we'd see all over LinkedIn that people get broken into because they had 10, 100,000 in their their thing, because banking was an issue too. Luckily, banks and credit unions have come a little bit more around, and banking, yes, still a little bit more expensive than normal, but at least that's there. And again, at least there's solutions out there that a lot of these dispensary owners can take advantage of to reduce the cash on hand, increase ticket average, increase tipping. That's another huge thing as well. It's like, hey, when people have terminals, they'll tip a little bit more as well. But yeah, and like you said, man, like cash is still, still a heavy thing for them. And then ATMs, like that's something else we can do, right? Like my company can help with ATMs and dispensaries. So if someone needs an ATM in there, we can provide them a free ATM in there. We have a tax loader that will come in. Obviously, depends on the areas. If you're in a super like rural area, it might be a little bit more challenging. But like if you're in a bigger city, things like that one, we can get some ATMs in there as well to make sure that, hey, if something ever does happen to the machine, has an issue, has a glitch, goes down for a little bit, you're going to have that backup and be able to have an ATM on site there to be able to make sure your clients aren't walking out.
Man, you can even bring an ATM in the store. That's pretty cool.
100%, and gift cards too, right? So with our machines, if you want gift card, we have gift card capability. Especially with the holidays right now, that's something that's super important, and it can be done anytime through the year too. So be able to take gift cards is something that I know a lot of people don't really think about until the holidays. But again, it's such an easy one because I forget what the last stats were, but a crazy amount of percentage of once people get gift cards, they don't really utilize the full amount, or they forget about it. So you're pretty much that's just extra money in your pocket for allowing them to do gift cards. And again, it works exactly with those with our terminals. You just be able to swipe it or insert the card and be able to go from there.
Yeah, and going back to the cashless ATM topic, I kind of want to share my own personal thoughts. It's like, if it's okay for us to put an ATM in the store, and that's okay, that's all right. What's the difference between just making the steps a little bit shorter and you just put your card in this little terminal here and it works as an ATM? It's the same thing, no? Yeah, that's how I see it. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not, I'm not saying this is right or whatever.
The way I kind of look at it, agreed, man. Like, the way I kind of look at it, and a lot of the people that don't like it, they kind of say like, hey, it's masking, what the transaction is, because they're not necessarily getting cash back. Like, if you go to an ATM, hey, I'm taking out $50, you're getting $50 in cash, right? When you go to a cashless ATM, it rounds up to normally like $10 or something like that, and you get some cash back, but you're not getting the full one. So they're like, well, it's not really an ATM withdrawal. You're really buying product with a debit card. So again, like I said, everybody's going to have their opinion. People are going to say everything what they want to do on it. But like I said, like until it's fully like broke, don't kind of like fix it kind of thing on it. But I agree. Like at the end of the day, it's like, listen, we're making dispensaries safer. We're allowing them to make more money. We're allowing them to get better tips. And it's a convenience thing. People don't want to walk around with cash. I can't tell you, like, I might have like $20 in my wallet at all time, like, but I don't ever take cash, right? And so going to a store, going to an ATM, going up there, and then having your dispensary do their job correctly and upsell, and then like, oh, well, I only have $50 and this is gonna be 65, so then they have to get out, pay another fee at the ATM and come back. So that always causes an issue. It's like, it's all about convenience and retail. How quick can we do it? What does the experience look like for our customers? Can they come in and easily pay with their card and walk out, or do we have to make them do 13 different steps and get cash and come back and get back in? So I'm with you, Sam, on that one. Is at the end of the day, it's like it's pretty much the same thing. But again, everybody's going to have their viewpoint on it. Everybody's always going to have their opinion on it. Like I said, I'm not saying one side's wrong and what the other side's right. At the end of the day, it's what's going to be best for our industry, what's going to be best for the high risk industry, and how can we make sure people are successful. And we have to, we can only do so much. We can't control the rules, regulations, and compliance, things like that one. But at the end of the day, the way I kind of look at it is, I'm here for my merchants. Whatever I can do to make them successful, that's what I'm going to make sure I'm going to be able to do.
Yeah, 100%, Sean. And so, many people who are looking for a payment processor right now, they're really guarded, and they have a lot of standards. They don't want this, that, and the third. And so, whether or not they choose you, let's kind of use you as a non-biased third party. What are some of the red flags you should be looking for? What might be some legal terms or contract terms that might be traps? What would you say for somebody who's trying to do all the due diligence possible to find the right payment processor? What do they need to be looking for?
Yeah, that's great questions. Obviously, a lot of times there's hidden fees. So if someone's not being fully transparent about that, obviously a big red flag. I wouldn't necessarily say like a reserve is a red flag unless like you've been processing for a year, have good chargebacks, and someone's still trying to do that one. You can probably find a place without it. In merchant processing, it's just always been known that there are early termination fees, right? Normally you're signing a 3 or 5 year agreement. especially in the high risk business, right? Like low risk, that's a completely different, kind of animal. But sometimes you're like, hey, if you're a true high risk account and kind of struggling to find it, if someone's making you sign a 3-year agreement, it's not the end of the world, right? It's like, hey, they're taking the risk, they're taking a lot of the liability on it. So I'm like, 3 years is not a lot, because a lot of times the early termination fee is something simple, 495 or something not that super expensive. Like, hey, that's well worth to be able to have it. So again, take a look at it. Not a huge red flag, but always something to keep in mind. Not everybody's early termination fee is gonna be 495 or something like that. Some of them are gonna be very extensive. So definitely take a look at that, what the actually early termination fee is. If it's something small, I wouldn't really worry about it. If it's like, hey, we're making you sign a 5-year agreement, and then if you cancel after a year, we're charging you the fees for the rest of the 4 years. Like, that's kind of aggressive. So take a look at that. I would take a look at, again, just a lot of the monthly fees, right? There's going to be a lot of different monthly fees that you're looking at, and there's going to be a lot of one-time fees. And, make sure that we have the differences. Obviously, one time, hey, if it happens, right? Your chargeback fees, your reversal fees, like you're only going to get charged that if it does happen. Take a look at that. But some of the monthly fees, like, you're going to see maybe G2 monitoring fees or high risk monitoring fees. And I see a lot of them are 50, $100 a month. So take a look at that as well. I think another thing is the PCI fees, right? You either have PCI or non-PCI. Make sure you're PCI compliant. Most processors are going to have a partner out there where you can get PCI compliant, because if you're not, a lot of times they're going to charge you 40, $50 a month for being PCI non-compliant. Well, if you become PCI compliant, which doesn't take that long, you can drop that fee down to $5, $10 sometimes, waive it if you guys are doing enough volume. So take a look at that. But also at the end of the day is the way I kind of look at it is like, can you trust the person you're working with, right? What is their background? Because, I think, a lot of payment people got kind of a bad name for a while, like just being like super shady, trying to do that one. So like, hey, definitely truly look at it. Like, hey, are they actually selling for a company? Is it just someone utilizing like a Gmail or a Yahoo kind of email? Are they actually a legit kind of company? What access do they actually have? And then a lot of times it's like, hey, what sponsored bank are they utilizing? Because again, with high risk, you start seeing people's like, oh, well, we can get you an account, but it might be, offshore or another country.
Yep.
And like, they don't
Yep.
have the same, FDIC insured things and ramifications if something happens.
Yep.
So being careful, like, hey, who's the actual true process in the back end of it? On that side too. So again, there's a lot of different things on it. And like, again, I'm, being a third party is, I don't, obviously I would love everybody to utilize, myself and my company, but if you are going through the process and you're just not sure, feel free to, reach out to myself, and I'm happy to kind of like review agreements or pricing or whatever and say, hey, yes, this is fair, this is not fair, and things to look at too. But, in high risk, right now it's just like, a lot of times it's, hey, where can we get it placed at? We might have to pay a little bit more just to get it done, but hey, let's get the processing done. We can adjust pricing on our products a little bit later. But right now it's high risk, and how many changes and compliance and things like that, and how many banks aren't really wanting a lot of that business. It's like, hey, if we can find a place and they're willing to do it, yeah, you might have to pay a little bit of premium for it, but it's well worth having that account right now. And then we can always adjust as needed as, the company grows.
Yeah, 100%. Really great stuff. You sold me, man. So no further questions from me. But we're starting to wrap up here, Sean. We have 12 more minutes, and I have 4 more questions. And so let's just jump right through these. So just, besides the hemp and cannabis brands, and the dispos, are there any other ancillary businesses that you work with?
Yeah, I mean, right now, like I said, we do everything from low risk to mid risk to high risk. So there's not really any kind of companies out there that are super, super off limits. Obviously it kind of goes case by case, but we work with a lot of like data tech companies. We work with a lot of ones that do events and they need to sell tickets to, CPA firms, marketing agencies. We do, like, again, a lot of CBD hemp. We do, we have a lot of restaurants and retail that we work with. We work with a lot of like lawyers that need to do invoicing. We work with a lot of, what else do we do? We do some on the like telemedicine side. But again, what I tell people that, they always ask like, hey, can you work with this one? Is like, hey, always pre-vet it with us. If I can't find a place to do it, most likely it's going to be very difficult or impossible to find, because I do have so many relationships out there. But any kind of tech ones, selling data. But and again, point of sale, I have a couple point of sale companies. But like if you're in any kind of ancillary company, you're supporting the cannabis, hemp, CBD, or just any business in general on that side, and you want to look at, let's take a look at your account and go through those pricings, because a lot of times I can save money on the better support side of it. But yeah, like you said, I mean, like, again, a lot of the ancillary ones, and with coming up to MJ BizCon next week, looking forward to connecting with a lot of them out there and seeing what they're doing, because unfortunately I do see on LinkedIn a lot, hey, I just got shut off here, what do I do, how do I pivot? That's what my company's here for.
Yeah, awesome. Well, love it, Sean. Thanks for coming on. Just a few more fun questions for you before we wrap up here. As we were discussing before we hopped on the call, you don't have to answer these. It's cool. First things first, I'm curious to hear more about your first time smoking cannabis or trying cannabis if it wasn't smoking.
Yeah, so I mean, that was probably my junior year of high school. Obviously, I live in Indiana, where hey, it's not legal here yet, but my brother was always a huge proponent of cannabis, and that was like the first time that I did it. I did like one time, and then probably I didn't do it again until, oh man, probably 6-7 years ago. Like I was always hey, I'm more of an alcohol. I like going out for happy hour and things like that. And then when I got into this business and started with Leaf Logic, 6-7 years ago, I was out of my wheelhouse. I knew tech and SaaS and how to grow companies, but cannabis was out of my wheelhouse. And at that point, I'd never been into a dispensary at all. And so luckily, Plant 13 was one of my clients, and I was really good friends with their general counsel at the time. And I was out in Vegas, and I was actually got to go to Plant 13 for my first dispensary. And obviously, that's a little bit different from most of the dispensaries out there, but it was a cool experience kind of seeing how things work and learning the technology. I had no idea what an MSO was, or sativa, or indica. I had no idea what all these things were when I first got into this space, because it was all new to me. And then over the last 6-7 years, man, it's become like second nature to me, and almost an industry expert. But being around so many great salespeople and support people and customer success, and a lot of these engineers, and just a lot of these other leaders that I've worked with all these companies, I've learned so much from so many people, and that's why one thing, Sam, I really love about the cannabis industry is like the connections are real, the partnerships are real, right? You go to a lot of different other industries, and I think a lot of them are just kind of a lot of fluff and things like that. But here, like a lot of people have stayed, people I've known for 6-7 years are still here, or different companies, but still in the industry, and you can always count on them. You call them up, they're going to be there. You ask questions. Like I've had, when I started my company, I had a lot of people reach out and say, hey, how can I sign up with you? I want to support you and your company. That's what I love about this industry. It's a niche community, but it's a community that we're supporting each other. Yes, you got some bad apples, but you're going to have that everywhere. But the relationships here are real. And I really love that, and appreciate everybody's support, over my 6-7 years here in this industry.
Yeah, I love the honesty, just to start off too, because a lot of people that work in the cannabis industry are really proud of the fact that they're daily or consistent users, shall we say. But there's lots of great people in this space that are not that way, and so it sounds like you're one of them. I know one of the big influencers on LinkedIn, shout out Seth Yakutan, hope you're doing well. He also doesn't consume, but not that they never have, and I think that's really cool. And I wanted to shout you out just for being honest about that, instead of saying no, I use it all the time.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I mean, yeah, probably probably a handful in my entire life. Like if anything, I'd be more of like an edible kind of guy, just because at night I kind of suck at sleeping, so be able to have an edible to kind of help relax me at night. But again, like it's not like a big thing for me. It's not again, I'm against the industry by any means. I fully support and everything like that. It's just not something that I do on a day-to-day kind of basis on it. If I'm in a state where obviously it's legal and people are doing it, I might do a hit or two. But again, I'm more of like an edible kind of guy. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm always fully transparent with people. I love what cannabis does for a lot of people and how much it helps people, and it's truly a great product, and I'm excited for the day that it does become very legal for everybody to actually enjoy, both medicinally and recreationally.
Yeah, 100%, man. And I was just about to ask what your favorite product would be these days if you consume. You just answered that for me, and so let's just move on to the last one, Sean, because I highly appreciate your time, and thank you for coming on. But real quick, so seeing what you know, knowing what you know, having the experience that you have, what do you see for the future of cannabis, and not just payments, but in general, for the next 4 or 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think a lot of the states kind of slow down, right? Some new states going live, and which states are going rec, and I think obviously you're going to continue to see a lot of consolidation, right? A lot of people trying to get out, selling their businesses, things like that as well. But at the end of the day, like, we still have so much ahead of us. While cannabis has been around for quite some time now, I think there's just so much ahead of us. I think sometimes, we're definitely over compliant. I'm not always a huge proponent of a lot of the compliance stuff and things like that one, but as a born salesman, like, that's just, kind of our kind of role on it. But, over the next 4 or 5 years, I think we'll make progress. I think a lot of times it just comes back down to us. Like, hey, how hard are we willing to push it? What are we willing to do? Where are we, holding our ground out? But I think a lot of this can be a lot of consolidation. I think not just on the dispensary side, but on the tech side too. There's a lot of point of sale companies, there's a lot of payment companies, there's a lot of marketing companies, there's a lot of different companies out there, SEO, marketing, things like that. So I think you're going to start seeing either people start partnering up together more. You're going to start seeing a lot more integrations, because that's what people are asking for, open APIs, things like that as well. But you're going to start seeing the consolidation. You're going to start seeing, hopefully we'll start seeing a little bit more accelerated growth. New York's, finally coming around. You're starting to see some Texas, things like that as well. But I think, the more and more research we have, the more and more data that we have, we're going to be able to grow. But again, I think a lot of people probably thought, 4 years ago we'd be fully legal by now. So it's always hard to say and kind of, assume what's going to happen. It's each day you kind of take it one day at a time. And, is it always going to be super easy in our industry? Or in the cannabis industry? No, it's not going to. But if you have a passion for it, you have a passion for the product, a passion for the people, passion for the industry, yeah, you're going to have some of those bad days, but you know that you're going to have just as many good days as well. And if you have a good, company to rely on, if you have a good, team around you that supports you, it's easier to make it through those bad days, to be able to help grow and make sure that the thing that you really care about is going to be be around for a long time.
Love it, Sean. Thank you so much. Once again, this is Sean. He runs a company called MTXE Merchant Processing. If you need help with your payments, this is the guy. I can highly recommend him. I work with him as well and haven't had anything but positive things to say so far. And so, thank you for helping me, Sean. Thank you for coming on the show, and wish you the absolute best in the future. And I'll leave your contact information in the video. But thanks again, Sean.
Appreciate it, Sam. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Sam here. Thanks again for listening to the GDM podcast. So we do websites and SEO for cannabis brands and operators, and we do things a little bit differently here at GDM, where we can promise results within weeks rather than months. And so if you're looking to sell more ounces, bongs, other premium products, start selling some more weed, get in touch with us at Green Dispensary Marketing to learn more. Thanks again for listening, and hope you have a great day.